Now there are some more terms that become important perhaps from your prelims point of view, not from mains point of view. And these are some terms that you should know because these are also species which play an important role. So for example, we have a concept of Keystone Mutualists. So what are these? These are basically groups of organisms which are mutually beneficial for one another. So it is related to mutually beneficial interactions. So how do we define it? A very simple example can be a bee and a flowering plant. How? Bee will need the flowering plant for the nectar. They need the nectar, and bees will also be the ones which will be the pollinators. It will help in spreading the seeds of this flowering plant, and because of that the population of plants will also start to grow. This flowering plant will start to grow in population. So when the flowering plant is allowing a bee to take the nectar from the flowers, it's also helping itself, right? It is also helping itself in a way that it will also spread in its population. So these two will be species which will be mutually beneficial for one another. Their interaction will be mutually beneficial for one another, and that's why these kind of organisms will be called as Keystone Mutualists. Then after that, we have another concept which is umbrella species. So when we talk about umbrella species, this is an example of a Siberian tiger which can be considered as an umbrella species. So when we talk about umbrella species, there are two important things that you need to understand. One, that they give a value to the geography in which they survive. For example, Siberian tiger will be found in a certain area, and there will be a lot of attraction towards that geographical area because of presence of these Siberian tigers. So that's why they become a huge part of the geography of a given region. Apart from that, why they are called as umbrella species, the most important reason is that because of them there will be many other species that will be protected. Normally, to a species like this, to an umbrella species, a large area is given or assigned as a protected area, and because it will be provided as a protected area for them, they will not only protect themselves, conserve themselves, but a large number of animals and plants which are also going to survive in the same ecosystem, they will also be benefited from this. And that's why such a species becomes umbrella species, because of this one species there will be many other species of plants and animals which will also benefit from it. So that's why they will be called as umbrella species. They'll be given a large area, they are tied to their geography, and they provide indirect protection to other species in the given ecosystem. So that's why these are called as umbrella species. Then after that, you have another example of a different kind of species which is called as a foundation species. So as an example, you can take a coral. Now why we would call a coral as a foundation species? Because they will be responsible for creating and maintaining the ecosystem. So if the corals are not present, then in that case this becomes a barren land, and then a lot of such species that survive because the corals are here will not be able to, and then in that case nothing will exist. So coral specifically becomes a foundation species because many of the species which are living in and around, they are here only because there was corals in these areas. So that's why these kind of species will be called as foundation species, because they are important for the creation and maintenance of these ecosystems. Then you have ecosystem engineers. For ecosystem engineers, the simplest of the examples are all the invasive species. So when we talk about the invasive species, we know that these are species which are non-native. These are non-native. Now these invasive species, what they do is, once they have been introduced into an ecosystem, they will start to modify that ecosystem according to their requirements. For example, if you talk about, let's say, a new predator that has been introduced into a given ecosystem, a given food chain, then in that case it will start to behave according to how it should behave. And because of its behavior, because of its, let's say, eating habits, you'll see that there will be a change in the entire ecosystem that will happen. So that's why these will be called as ecosystem engineers, because they change or modify the ecosystem according to their requirements. So this is what happens normally with invasive species, and this can happen with plants, this can happen with herbivores, it can happen with predators. All these can be examples of ecosystem engineers if they are modifying the ecosystem where they are going. So just remember that when we are talking about ecosystem engineers, they will either change their internal biology so that they can make the environment their own, and if not, then in that case they will change the external environment. For example, you can take trees or corals. These will be examples of changing the internal biology, and in this case they are actually also called as autogenic environment ecosystem engineers. And in the case when you talk about external environment, you can take beavers as an example. They will be called as allogenic ecosystem engineers. So these are few of them. Then after that you also have indicator species, and we talked about indicator species while we were discussing the amphibians, that why these species are important, because they are very sensitive to the external environment, and they will not be able to survive if there are even small changes in the external environments in the given area wherever they survive. Then after that you have something called as a flagship species. And when we talk about flagship species, these are species which are very important, or they hold a value for the habitat in which they live. So the example that you see here is a one-horned rhino. And a one-horned rhino for India, for the northeastern region of India in Assam where they are located, where they are found, they are very important. And they give the whole importance to the ecosystem of that area. And that's why they are very much tied to that region. They become very important. Not only this, many a times you will see that a flagship species will be used for a movement. It will be used for a campaign. It will be used to prove a point. Many a times you will see that even government authorities will make the flagship species the central point of their conservation efforts, so that under the name of flagship species in that area, the entire effort of conservation can be carried out. Because if let's say it was about a smaller or less important species, then perhaps they would not have got all the authority, they might not have received all the resources or the support that was required. But if flagship species come into the picture, in that case it becomes very easy for organizations, also for the governments also, to take any step for the conservation of a given ecosystem. So that's why flagship species become very important in this aspect. So certain other examples apart from the one-horned rhino, tigers are also examples, pandas are examples. All these become examples because they are the ones where all the attention would be, and that's why they can be used as flagship species. So all these terms that we have seen, keystone species, keystone mutualist, flagship species, umbrella species, etc., all these terms can become very important from prelims perspective, but keystone species for you remains very important from even mains point of view. So that has to be given an extra effort in understanding. So this is about this topic.